the example of how nothing should ever be done until Elon Musk screws that up. I'm a freelance loose cannon now.
I want my money now.
Confusing, but it is purposefully confusing.
They're stealing your money in front of your face and making you feel good about it.
I'm gonna be the town idiot.
Your voice is your freedom.
You can't watch SpongeBob because it's gonna turn your kids gay. Like, not to get preachy.
Welcome back to Strangers Talking Politics. I'm Alli.
I'm Bethany.
And I'm Jesse.
Welcome back. Today we are joined by Erik. Erik, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I, Butte kid, grew up here, left screaming when I was 18, vowed to never come back, went all over to school. Worked at the post office, got involved with organized labor, from there, ended up kind of rising up through the ranks there and getting into my national union's legislative and political program, and got to know a lot of candidates. We were technically grassroots lobbyists, and most of it federal, so we were going to DC. But got connected, helped with John Tester's first race, and was on my way to moving to DC for the union job. And my wife at the time got pregnant, and that wasn't a good place to raise kids. And joked with John about if he had any openings in Montana. He happened to have one in Butte, and my parents lived here, so we and worked for him for almost 17 years. And I was his regional director in southwestern Montana, and then I was his. He decided to create a policy portfolio that did stuff from state covering natural resources. So from 2012 on, we did that as a team. In theory, we could be closer to people on the ground for policy input and getting around the state. And then, people didn't need to fly to DC to communicate with them or get things done. Energy, water, public lands, wildlife, everything in between. EPA and Superfund, which being in Butte, that kind of made sense because it's the example of how nothing should ever be done. That's me in a nutshell. Now I'm semi-retired, and the 29 years of total federal service. One of the perks of working for a member of Congress who loses an election is you qualify for whatever you had in the pension system, which it's better than a stick in the eye, but it's not great, and not as great as people think that the pension is, but I don't have an age reduction, so I qualify to take it early. I'm 49, which is pretty cool. Takes the edge off. I get participate in the federal employee health benefit plan till Elon Musk screws that up. And I've been kind of on a mission to expose a lot of bad things in government, maybe help people understand how to interact with government, because we just don't anymore as citizens, and it's really frustrating. I kind of want to shake that up. But when you work for a member of Congress, no matter what you do or where you speak, you're speaking for them. So you really don't have your own voice. And really not having my own First Amendment rights was painful and torturous. So having those back, I guess I'm a freelance loose cannon now.
I love that. A freelance loose cannon.
Yeah, I cannot wait to delve into the gossipy type stuff, because I know you got some juicy stuff. I just know it.
Tons. And it's, some of the background on how things came to be. And, a lot of it's, I've learned things about entities well outside of Senator Tester's jurisdiction, things that we're not going to talk about because it's local government or it's state politics, on and on and on. So just don't say anything. But, some of those things that go on, and I guess evolution is the wrong word, devolution, really, because of politics in Montana, dark money taking over, lobbyists calling the shots. We're in a crisis. So as Democrats, I think in society, I think we're tentative. Democrats are worse. We sugarcoat things, and we don't tell people like it is. And the problem for us in the balance, because you need multiple sides of every debate to come up with workable solutions. But, we're too busy worried about hurting people's feelings, and, we sugarcoat too much. So nothing ever changes for the better when you do that. And, it's not a comfortable place to be, because you have longtime friends that'll end up hating you for just, exposing things. But sometimes it just needs to be done. I got a kid, and I don't want him to inherit a world that is totally insane. And our major newspapers in the state they're all struggling. I don't want to replace journalism. I want to inspire it. I want the big papers, the TV stations, I kind of want to give them a nudge to be better. That's the goal. And the same thing, when it comes across as, criticizing Democrats, I want Democrats to be better. So I've been one my whole life, and I don't like what I see. Some people take it personally and don't like to be nudged. That's just the way it is. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm nudging gently.
Well, and you've gotten into media yourself a little bit recently with celebrity journalist Bill Foley.
The celebrity journalist himself, he had a podcast called the Buttecast, and he was asking me forever to come on his Buttecast. And after the election, I was like, what the hell? I was on the radio and kind of outed some things on a local call-in show. And we were going to do one episode of the Buttecast that ended up two. A lot of it was talking about Superfund and, some of the things in local government, secrecy, things that are going bad here. That have for a while. They're just really bad now. And those episodes got listened to and people were really engaged. Bill was hearing about them a lot. They were, getting downloaded left and right. People want this. And at the same time, just on my personal Facebook page, I was getting some things out there. Where I really snapped was when the Forest Service signed off on the decision to essentially sell off the Crazy Mountains. And, just from my personal page, the time, 1,300 friends, directly got shared 600 times. And then others sharing things. I'm getting calls from all over the country. I'm like, people really need to know what's really going on. So we started a podcast, came up with the Mad About Montana podcast. We exposed some things, a lot of current events. And I started doing that between Facebook, personal Facebook, and putting things out. I have a lot of people in Helena, old connections, and in a lot of cases, Republicans that are giving information that they can't expose because their party, they'll get kicked off committees or they'll get punished and primaried, or the governor will be mad and they'll get harassed. Steve Daines is a harasser and all that of these people. So I won't, I'm happy to be the person that exposes this stuff because I don't care.
That sort of brings us into one of today's topics, which is the property tax bill. And you've been pretty vocal about that on social media and I think through your podcast as well. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what's going on? What passed for our listeners? We're talking on Wednesday evening. You're probably hearing this a week later, but can you tell us what passed this morning?
Yeah, well, I'll start a little bit. In 2023, this 2023 session, there were deals cut. The governor got the usual recommendation from the Department of Revenue to adjust property valuations to make sure the taxes didn't spike. And, anybody who followed Ryan Bussey's campaign, they said Ryan Bussey or Greg Giaforte raised your taxes. Yeah, he did because he ignored the Department of Revenue. But the other thing is the legislature raised our taxes too because they ignored it. And what they did is the net, we overpaid our taxes basically, people in Montana, the residential homeowners, and, I guess renters for that matter, but we overpaid our taxes and they gave corporate tax breaks. So, the big corporations, BNSF, Northwestern Energy, telecoms, they got huge tax breaks on our backs. And, most people are pretty tense about that. I don't know that they know the details of the bailed out corporations. So that $500 million is baked in every biennium now.
Well, and to be a little bit more specific, what happened during the last session, the legislature ignored it. But because of what's been happening with property taxes in Montana, residential values have increased significantly, whereas commercial properties haven't seen quite that same level of property value increase. And so more and more of the tax burden is being shifted to homeowners.
If everything just stayed the same, that would still be true. Right. It's just got, because of corporate tax breaks and then not doing anything to adjust the property tax valuations of residential property, we got extra hit. So coming into this session, every legislator, they were saying, what we heard on the doors before the election is we need property tax relief.
That's what we were telling them in 2023. And then they ignored it.
Yes. Well,
and for 2 years, they got that message.
It's interesting, too. I think it's important that we include the statistic that the average homeowner in Montana saw a 21% jump in their property tax over the last year or so. And I think it's also important that we understand when we're talking about what the governor proposed versus what passed today versus what should happen, those differences can be hard to detect in the numbers. And so if you could help me understand the differences more than just, because when you look at the numbers, what passed today is about on high earners, it's like a $600 difference per year. So it just doesn't seem like a big deal. But overall, in the grand scheme of the big budget, what does that mean?
So I mean, what matters to people is what happens to them in their pocketbooks. And 21% average. You're right. Some counties got hit a lot harder than others. Eastern Montana didn't get hit very hard. Butte Silver Bow, I think we got like 36%. It was huge.
Yeah, with Graham County, Phillipsburg, Drummond saw 60%.
Yeah, so it was a little different. And when you're talking, we're not the wealthy counties. We're not the Gallatin County. So people can't in places like here. We have a ton of retirees and aging population. You got people on a fixed income that are being priced out of their homes and just by taxes. So yeah, they're pissed. They come in and this fix. It's just a multiplier on valuations. What's the you talked about average, so it's the average. Okay, so if we wanted to fix the last 2 years of property valuations and the future one, the one's going to be mailed to us in June, the multiplier that fixes that, and it's for everybody across the board. None of this stuff where different counties are going to get different rates. Up until I think the cutoff was a property tax valuation of 1.5 million, they get a different rate above that. That's very few of us. That would give everybody property tax relief. It would have relieved all property taxpayers of the burden of the subsidy to corporations. So, of course, Northwestern Energy, the Montana Chamber of Commerce, all the lobbyists in hell, and all 800 of them, they vehemently oppose giving up their windfall. You can expect them to oppose that. That's what corporations do. What is shocking is that the legislators who are sent there by citizens, voters, people, they don't seem to really mind, and they'll spend things. So what we got is these competing property tax bills, which I call gimmicks. And if you remember 2 years ago, when they passed this rebate, that's an old political trick. Throw some money at them, they'll love it. And there's a lot of people that do get fooled by that. We'll give you a portion of your money back and declare ourselves heroes.
I found that really interesting. That was something that happened in a discussion with my parents, as a matter of fact. I was having a discussion about the fact that we have a budget surplus, and they were excited about that. And I said, yes and no, right? Like, it's great that we have a balanced budget, but I don't like being overcharged. And I don't think that having to wait for a rebate that I didn't get because I don't own property, even though I was still part of the people who got overcharged, I was like, I'm not excited about that. Throwing a few cents of my own at me late, it's like a late refund, 6 to 8 weeks for delivery. Like, what are we doing here? I want my money now.
You're spot on. We got overcharged. They're sitting on it. And one of their, and I'm using air quotes, fixes ties it to taking the money we were overcharged, putting it into trust to create more slush funds to just skim off of. I'll get into that.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I am completely lost. I'm trying so hard to follow along, but I don't know anything about. I've never owned property. I've rented my entire life. So I've been trying to take notes about you said the residential and then renters overpaid, and then corporations got tax breaks. They got huge tax breaks. And so I guess it's maybe for anybody who's like me, who just does not understand the lingo, doesn't really understand what that means. Well, I guess my first question is when you say that residential owners / renters overpaid on what does that mean? Is that not a number that's set by the government already?
So the state's going to collect a certain amount of taxes based on our tax rates.
Mills.
Well, yes, our tax mills. Over the last few years, there have been a number of reductions passed for business, and some of them are good reductions. I mean, the increase to the business exemption for equipment, that's pretty legitimate. But we're also talking about the rapid increase in property values, and that being more and more of a burden on homeowners. So you see a larger and larger percentage of the tax revenue being generated by individual Montanans and homeowners specifically, while we're passing a lot of different tax exemptions and tax cuts for the corporations and the businesses. On top of that, we have this huge surplus. So in addition to taxing individual Montanans more and taking more out of their pockets, we have extra money, and we're reducing the tax burden on these corporations. So what's been happening with the lobbyists is they're taking on less of the burden. They're seeing their taxes decrease in many circumstances, and we're still overcharging Montanans.
Yeah, and some of the things that happen to lead to that. So, think of it as a renter. if your rent is $1,000 a month and the property taxes go up by $50 a month, it's $600 a year, you can expect a rent increase of $50 a month because they're going to pay the owner of the property is going to pass that right on to you. That's how that's going to work. So renters end up bearing that as well in the form of pass-through money. And then, what's happened in the last few years, and it's not just COVID. The mass migration to Montana is one thing, because there's a lot of people that have had wealth that came here. But what else we had starting, 2015 or so, and really just kind of taking off since 2018 being a big peak year, was millionaires and billionaires showing up in Montana. They'll buy, vacation homes, $10 million vacation homes, $30 million ranches, money that has really never been in the state, that has driven up everybody's property value because it's all based on appraisals. Like right now, I have a house that on paper, they might say is worth $350,000. But the reality is, I don't think I'd be able to sell it for it, but I'd certainly not be able to replace it for that because I can't afford to go buy another house. Everybody here is stuck and held hostage as these values go up because you can't do anything about it. But because of our tax system, based on those appraised values, which is kind of a paper appraisal that they're going to look at your square footage, number of bedrooms, blah, blah, blah. They're going to keep going up in value, and it's how much they go up every year that hurts. And that's why that recommendation from the Department of Revenue that, God, every governor for decades has used and taken the recommendation. If you don't want to have massive residential property taxes, you have to legislate this multiplier for this next 2-year period to keep property taxes stable and predictable. So this is the first time that they chose not to do that, and our taxes went through the roof.
Well, and Bethany, I hope that makes it slightly less confusing, but it is purposefully confusing.
Yeah.
And we haven't even gotten into the fact that the legislature has changed the appraisal periods to every 2 years as opposed to every 6 years, which is what it used to be.
Yep.
This is a system that is purposefully made as complicated and convoluted as possible because that does allow the potential for loopholes, and that makes it something that is easily exploited by people with the resources to exploit it.
Or the lobbyists who are now crafting most of our legislation because we have term limits here.
Well, and I think a lot of the, uproar or, what we see people upset about right now, particularly with the Democratic Party, and, you expect this kind of behavior from the Republicans.
Bingo.
But we didn't really expect to see it from the Democrats, who are in the minority and really don't have much of a reason to support this kind of bill, except that it makes the lobbyists happy. It's going to pass without them. So why do they need to vote against their values, to vote against their constituents' values?
So bills will turn into, we'd call them in Congress when there's must-pass legislation, they turn into a Christmas tree because everybody wants to hang their ornament on it. That's where you end up with a defense bill that has, cigarette taxes attached to it. Never used to really happen in the state of Montana. It was, the rules prevented it, but it was also frowned upon. So now we're in an era where the lobbyists are in control. They're sliding in their priorities, their clients want at the last minute. And we've got citizen legislature. They're trying to read and interpret and understand as fast as they can, but these bills are changing. Yesterday on the floor, there were people who said, I don't even know what's in this, but we need to pass it. Thinking, wow. So, that's part of the issue, how these things get blown out of control. And now we've tied it to other things. All these convoluted property taxes bills. Democrats tried to have a couple competing different ideas. There's 3. And their intentions are probably they're good from their perspective. With housing costs and housing situations in Missoula are different than they are in Kalispell, Butte, Helena, all that. So it was, that's their perspective and that's the way things work. So, different classes of property valuations, things like that. Maybe they make sense in Missoula. They might not, in Anaconda or Butte. But it wasn't going to give everybody relief. That was kind of the problem with those. The only real fair way to make sure that everybody gets relief from the massive increase without picking winners and losers in a big way was the simple deal with the multiplier, make it retroactive. Well, the Democratic bills actually didn't deal with the retroactive, so it left the $500 million overpayment in place forever. $500 million we overpay no matter what. And then it's disingenuous to tell us you're giving us relief when you're leaving that baked into the cake. And I think that's why a lot of people really oppose that. I can speak for myself, and I know some of the old legislators who know the tax system and were experts in this stuff are explaining it highway robbery. And they count on people not understanding, not looking into it, and a lack of journalism in Helena. I mean, we used to have Lee Enterprises that had people like Chuck Johnson camped out there constantly. And it's not like that anymore. There's a little more picking and choosing.
Yeah,
Get
the
to know what
Republican media apparatus, especially in this state, I think convolutes a lot of things, right? Like they bill it as, oh, well, our budget's really stable. Yay, Gianforte. Or yay, Republican supermajority. When the reality is they're stealing your money in front of your face and making you feel good about it, right? It's classic old Irish saying of, if you're going to tell somebody to go to hell, make them look forward to the trip.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating to see because when I hear figures like $500 million, I think about places like Warm Springs that could directly benefit from that money. I think about the services that are being cut and are going to be cut that our state is going to go without. And I wonder, what are we doing? What is that money for? Is it just sitting there collecting interest? It seems like they're siphoning it up into the billionaires that moved here. And it seems like, I feel very much like at some point, the richest people in this country have figured out that Montana is an easy target. And now they're here just cashing in at our expense.
Think about it sitting there and collecting interest. And I think that's a key point, because one thing that our legislature has been frustrated with and called out a few times is the fact that our governor has a giant slush fund that sits there, collects interest, and you can spend it on whatever they want. I don't think they were so much upset that the governor had it. I think it was more that they didn't have their own. But now it looks like the legislature has created their own special slush fund that they're going to be able to collect interest on.
To an extent, but they're still going to give the governors the key. The governor's going to have the key to the cars. So where that first slush fund came from, Congress sent all the money from the American Rescue Plan to state. Now, the Gianforte administration, they didn't roll a lot of that out. They sat on it, invested it. That's where this slush fund interest, $86 million worth, came in. And a lot of us started becoming aware of, this is how it works with the slush funds through the Jason Ellsworth scandal. I mean, because Jason Ellsworth was operating off of money the governor gave him out of that slush fund interest, and he was actually using it to help dismantle our judiciary. So very partisan, very aggressive. And I think a lot of us as Democrats were scratching our heads because the chief defenders of Jason Ellsworth's activities were Democrats and 9 Republicans. And, they have somebody else can give their logic because I don't buy it. I understand what they think they're doing, but it's dumb. And, they defended the guy to the hilt, making excuses for him, delaying it. They play this game that they think Austin Knudsen's going to actually investigate something when he's got a history of covering for Ellsworth himself. If they really wanted investigated, they should have sent it to the FBI, but they didn't. So
yeah, it's interesting. We talked about that a couple episodes ago, and about at what point does the shoe finally fall? At what point do we just put our foot down and say enough is enough? Virtue does matter. Our values do matter. Is it going to temporarily harm some people? Probably, but enough with this BS shady game of whatnot. We're talking about people's lives here, and these are our leaders. They're supposed to be leading from the front, and they're supposed to be leading in ways that are best for their constituents and their people, not in ways that are best for their party. And the idea that the party politics has overtaken the importance of the service to the people from either party is it's enemy number one for me personally.
I agree. After the election, November and December, I had a couple different occasions, and I heard the same line from a few different legislators. And both of them went, well, we'll go to Helen and figure out what we have to give up to get Medicaid expansion. I took them aside. I didn't want to embarrass them publicly. I took them in both occasions and many other conversations. I said, hey, you need to look at this a different way. You need to tell Greg Gianforte, if you don't do something, you're going to kick 78,000 people off of Medicaid. And the rural hospitals that are going to take it the hardest and close down are in these bright red areas on the map. So what you need to do is go to Greg Gianforte and say, what are you going to give us to help with your problem? Well, I won't say we all want. Democrats tend to want the Medicaid and things, but it is Greg Gianforte's problem. They need to flip it and point that out to him. And it's not different with property taxes. I mean, right now today, I mean, I came in at the last minute because I got legislators and lobbyists on Facebook arguing with people. I'm just calling them out. Well, Greg Giaforte said he'd veto this and he doesn't like it. You don't work for Greg Giaforte. Send him the fix that helps the people and make him veto it.
Well, call Giaforte's bluff.
Yes.
He wasn't going to veto it. Everybody knows. If you are paying attention to what's happening in the state, his donors, the Republican Party's donors, and like you said, the close to 80,000 people who would have lost healthcare coverage and access to healthcare are almost exclusively in rural communities.
I'm so sorry. I'm gonna be the town idiot for this, I think, episode because I just don't know anything about it. So you guys are talking about a slush fund. So I have a couple of questions. So I'm just gonna ask one at a time. What is a slush fund, and where does it come from? Is it because we're paying too much money?
Yeah.
Well,
So what happens basically is when we have a budget surplus in Montana, we have to run a balanced budget. It's law. So when the legislatures go up to Helena and they figure out the budget for the next 2 years, has to be balanced. We cannot spend more than we take in. For the past couple of terms, we've had a surplus, extra. So what they did was they took that money and they put it in an investment account. And there were other monies that came to our state as well from federal dollars. They put all that stuff in an investment account so it would grow interest. And the interest off of that money is being put into slush funds. Slush funds are just basically checking accounts that whoever is in control of them can do whatever they want with. And in this case, that's Governor Gianforte. And in this case, there's so many good things that Governor Gianforte could be doing with the slush fund, with the regular funds, with a whole lot of things that are not happening. And so when you're talking about, when we're talking about a slush fund, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the interest that's being accrued off of the extra money that we overpaid, that we should have back anyway, that we don't have control over where it spends.
Their money was coming from the federal government. People weren't quite as upset about it or quite as worried about it because it's the entire country paying for it. The new fund is an overpayment of Montana taxes.
So what they're proposing now, because I think the lobbyists, when you look at where the money went from, the interest, who got the benefits of it, almost everybody who is a beneficiary of this somehow is a client of one or two lobbyists. I mean, everybody. I mean, it's that blatant. Well, and to take a step back, I mean, the general way government's supposed to operate is you got your legislative branch that they appropriate money and they direct spending. They don't micromanage it, but you put it into little boxes and say this is what it's for. Because, as elected officials, you want to retain some oversight, your priorities, your pet projects, so you could direct that spending. With these sorts of things that are unaccountable, the legislature is giving up their ability to appropriate, just handing the keys over to the governor to do political favors, basically, or favors to donors, or in a lot of cases, there's these, in a state like Montana, it's really easy to have a couple of kingmaker lobbyists that dole out things to sub-lobbyists, and that's where we are. So that's kind of how the slush fund works, where they're spending taxpayer dollars without specific legislative authority.
So because it's extra money, basically they can kind of just do whatever they want with it, essentially?
Yeah, because the legislature isn't exercising its authority to rein that in.
Well, and it's not just that they can do whatever they want with it. A big part of this is, like, for example, the petroleum levy in the state. They have, the coal trust, there are certain responsibilities that have to be paid for by the state that come out of taxes on other industries. And those other industries see these increased taxes on Montana homeowners. And they say, well, hey, maybe you can give us a little bit of a tax break and pay for these things with money from the homeowners instead of from us. Why is coal paying for this? Why is oil paying for this? Let the homeowners pay for it.
Yeah, basically, so now there's a companion appraisal to, instead of giving us real property tax relief, the lobbyists came up with, and earlier this week I published a document that I got that is the lobbyist playbook that describes a lot of this stuff going on that they're manipulating. And, it's just like tick, 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 tick. They've been doing these things all throughout the session, following the lead of the lobbyists. So now they want to take our money that we're overpaying, put it into a trust fund, and they want to operate off the interest earned, sitting on our money again, and then trying to convince us that this is a good deal. And part of the thing that they're doing in the process is they're trying to bring Democrats on board. They'll offer them a few crumbs and say, well, we'll devote part of this to child care. We'll deliver part of it to our definition of affordable housing, which in a lot of cases still ends up in the pockets of lobbyists and their clients, because what they call affordable, is...
Let's see, well, they haven't done shit about affordable housing.
No.
They've changed zoning, but they haven't actually incentivized affordable housing.
Right.
No, I looked at affordable housing last week, and one of the quote unquote affordable housing apartments, the new builds in Missoula for a 2-bedroom, I think is $1,800. And it's that's not affordable.
Not by any measure. And then you've got, you'll have these lobbyist forming corporations that are getting the money to say that they're building affordable housing. And all they're really doing is they're a middleman pocketing interest, like an oversight fee that's based on our money. And they're trying to do more of that. So we've got this bill, HB 924, which is the slush fund bill that's somehow supposed to fool us, the people, into believing that we're getting an overall good deal out of our property taxes. But they're sitting on $1.2 billion that we'll be overpaying. And mind you, while they're doing all these gimmick bills, they're rushing them through at the last minute without public scrutiny. A tax bill last night in the House, they actually, it's a weird process where you have to have, committee, second reading, third reading to get passed. They did a bunch of amendments, which normally you have to go back to appropriations and get a fiscal note so you know how much it costs and what damage it does. They voted to skip that and just rush to it. Again, rush to the third reading. Nobody knows what's in it, what it costs, anything like that. We don't get to see it. And it's the Republicans, Nancy Pelosi didn't really say it, but they were all up in arms. If you remember with the Affordable Care Act, we have to pass it so you can see what's in it. They ran with that for years and years and years. Out of context. They're literally Representative Paul Fielder, said effectively the same thing on the floor. I have no idea what this is. I don't even know what's in it. It's been amended so many times, but by God, we got to get this passed. Wow.
Yeah, and that's sort of the strange area where we're finding a lot of commonality between even big Republican supporters that understand tax law and tax policy, because they ignored it in 2023. They didn't so much ignore it in this session as they did purposefully delay it, so they could rush it through at the last minute. But they put themselves in this terrible situation where they can't let the session end without passing something.
Well, that's what they're fooling us. Now they can't.
Or they look like complete fucking morons. Now they're passing legitimately bad policy because they don't want to look like fools. But it's going to screw over all the taxpayers.
And they'll come back and spin us, and this is going to be a bipartisan. Well, you just don't understand how hard it is. That's what we keep hearing. So Brian Schweitzer, they tried to pull that when he was governor. And, he wasn't a politician or anything, but the master politician nonetheless. He vetoed their bills and was like, no, this sucks. Go back to work. Sometimes you have to call them back for a special session and say, this is what you're going to do. And the governor has every right to say, you guys have screwed this up so bad. They don't have to do it by the end of the session because they've screwed it up.
Well, Greg Hertz out of the Polson area is one of those experts at saying it's complicated, it takes time. It's well, that's your job. That's why we elect you.
Yep.
And you've had 4 years. Let's get real.
Absolutely.
We were talking a little bit before the podcast started, and you were saying that, what happened today. So can I ask what happened today? Did a bill get passed?
The very simple fix that would have taken care of this for the people of Montana, the property tax issue, change the multiplier, fix it to 0.76. There was an opportunity to pass that in the Senate. Send it to the governor's desk, and we don't have to worry about this, and we can all be safe. It got voted down. Every Republican and 3 Democrats voted against it. And I don't sugarcoat anymore. And some of these people, they've been longtime friends. They completely sold us out. And I'm not shy about it. I used to be, and it's well, there still are people, and when the Democrats have turned into the party of, well, we suck a little bit less than they do, that's a problem for me, because you still suck. And now we got people, there's a whole army of lobbyists right now. And this just happened in the last couple hours. I made a pretty salty post. People started sharing it. And, I usually name names, but I just posted the roster. Well, some of those people who were on the roster decided to try to defend themselves. And they're not doing well because they're making stuff up.
You said 3 Democrats also voted against it. If they hadn't voted against it, would it still have been a no?
Loaded question, because a lot of these things are political theater where that might be planned out that it goes that way. It could have been a last minute decision. And truly, we have 800 lobbyists registered in Helena. It's unheard of to deal with 150 legislators. So there's a chance that, maybe they would have peeled off, but all these people they were cutting deals with, the 9 Republicans that they want to sing their praises and defend their misdeeds, well, they all voted against it too. These great people who just care about Montana and blah, 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 with this whole facade, as predicted by many of us, they crapped on us at the first opportunity. Well, they crap on us on every opportunity, pretty much, just be honest. But these 3 Democrats, and that's where the hard part is, their vote as a middle finger to the people who sent them there is offensive. One of the first ones to jump on, and, it's not the first time that I've been at odds with a few of these people. Some of them I'll pick up the phone and talk to and, try to reason with them. Some I won't even bother because you just can't get there, and they're controlled by something other than what people think. This army of lobbyists unleashed this afternoon on Facebook, and it's all the people that have pork in the slush fund bill. They're out there, Democrat lobbyists included. They're lashing out at me. They're making calls everywhere because I posted the lobbyist playbook. They didn't want it out there, of course. Legislators didn't want it out there, but screw them. And they came up with this term. This is ridiculous. Volatile revenue. So they're all repeating it like they invented a new word, and they did. Volatile revenue is important to housing. It's important to childcare. Volatile revenue. What this is the same as the Sackett family telling everybody that they had the new miracle drug that's going to cure everything called OxyContin and spreading it all over, like manure. Like, we're supposed to believe this volatile revenue thing. And Montana voters need to know, whenever they hear that, it's manure, and we should have volatile voters on the other side of it. If you hear a legislator use that term, volatile revenue, trying to sell this BS, that's a puppet of lobbyists. And they need to be, they need to be challenged. Primary the puppets.
Well, it really is a big problem in our state because while we do have a citizen legislature, they interact with their constituents only so much. When they go over to Helena for this 4 to 4.5 months, that is 6 lobbyists for every single legislator.
Yeah.
That is speaking over their shoulder, trying to direct them, trying to tell them what to do every single day for 4+ months. Whereas their constituents, can you take off that time to go over to Helena? I mean, if you are writing a letter, are they even going to be able to read it? Most of the time, no.
Well, they could. They just don't.
They don't.
They don't care.
So with this getting voted down, what does that mean for, like, me as a renter or someone who is a homeowner? Does it just mean that, like, now property taxes, they're just not going to go down, they're going to stay the same? Are they going up? Is there a different bill that's up that, like, they voted no because they might be trying to get this one in?
There's 2 other bills to screw us further because they voted that down. It's dead. Theoretically, I guess they could blast it again, I think, but it's not going to go anywhere. So the lobbyist dream bills are left. Now, hopefully every Democrat will stand up and say, hell no, and vote against these because it's not real relief. And, we have to go through this application process and beg for our money back. Some of us will qualify, some of us will not. And if you're in certain situations like me, I won't qualify, so I don't get the rebate. I also get an automatic 40% tax increase. 40% on top of whatever other screwing they're going to do. So I am going to have to sell my home because I can't afford it.
So why do you get a 40% increase?
So there's a lot of different situations where, people that don't have traditional mortgage or fee land or things like that, a lot of different situations. I have, I guess it's me, I because of the timing, complex story, long story short, is my mortgage holder is a relative that has an LLC. It's registered to the LLC, not me. So under their rules, I don't qualify as a residential property owner, even though I still have to pay residential taxes. I'm still encumbered by that, but I can't qualify for the rebate under their rules because, of course, they don't want to really give me my money back because it gives them more to play with in Helena.
And that's part of why the bill that they did push forward requires that anybody to qualify for it has to fill out a form, has to submit paperwork if they want to see this reduction. I mean, they killed any reductions or incentives for renters.
Yeah.
And then for the people that are homeowners or even that own long-term rental properties, they have to fill out a crap load of paperwork to get these reductions.
Yep.
They're making people jump through hoops to get back the tax dollars that they shouldn't have to pay in the first place.
And I'll tell you, like people like my mom, I had to get that form from my mom, and it's not easy to find. It wasn't easy to get to. The Department of Revenue website it's a mess. I mean, it is a disaster for a government website. That's not an accident, So the two tax bills are still pending, so they could theoretically change, but they are so baked with lobbyist wish list things, and the lobbyists are in control of our government. No question whatsoever. If something doesn't change and these legislators stand up to the lobbyists and say no, we're going to get some level of getting screwed. You got the Chamber of Commerce saying, absolutely, we will not tolerate residential tax breaks. That they talk about a tax shift, and when in reality it's a shift back. We'll be not subsidizing them, and they have a lot of sway. I mean, there's Democrats who are telling their constituents, "Well, I have to listen to the Chamber of Commerce too." No, you don't. You can listen to the businesses in your community.
What is the way forward? What do you think it's going to take to reverse all of this or to do better?
We're not weighing in, and we're letting these people get away with it because they will come back from Helena and give us some snow job about, how hard they fought and this and that, because we don't look at their voting records. We don't pay attention to what's going on. We don't have, Chuck Johnson's of the world camped out in the Capitol reporting on things. And, they're still reporting on some scandals, but they pass so quick.
Yeah, but let me ask you this. I can look at any voting record of any representative, and it's going to be a foreign language to me. I'm not going to understand what it's saying. When I was trying to do some research on these property tax measures, I couldn't understand what was good and what was bad about it. How do we communicate better with our constituents so that people can see the forest for the trees instead of just going with the easy misinformation headline that they're constantly fed with Republican media?
And it's not just Republican media. I mean, there's plenty of left media that gets a lot of donations too that looks the other way on some issues. There's legislators like Becky Edwards. She's from Bozeman. And I've known Becky for a long time and worked with her on conservation issues and stuff. I'm a big fan because she's a populist. She went there to represent people. And what she'll do on her account, she'll post videos. Sometimes she's venting and pissed off what happens for the day. And it's not a full description of everything that goes on, but she's given her opinion. Hey, people, this is what's going on in my world and what I think you need to hear about. My representative, Donovan Hawk, he posts a lot of stuff on Facebook to try to give people a taste of what he deals with every day. Sometimes gets into certain issues. I think they know that the media is not covering these things. Here's what you need to know. Honestly, the Democratic Central Committees, that's one of the things that structurally we should be doing. We should be telling people what's going on, and people should be showing up at meetings and having dialogue, and we should be exchanging information back to our representatives in Helena. And every community, every county has them. We need to have a voice with our legislators and a voice back to the people so we can say what's going on. Now, the state party, on a call on Monday, tried to explain this call is so we can tell you when you have to contact your legislators. I don't know. That's not how it works. I think citizens have to get more active, and that includes Republicans. They have central committees too. If they want things and, they want to worry about Democrats eating babies in the basement of pizza parlors, they should go to their central committee and talk about that. Or they're obsessed with bathrooms right now. That's where they should vent their frustrations on their imaginary issues.
Do you think that Republicans rely on headlines that allow their constituents to be comfortable instead of challenging constituents to be more active?
No, they deliberately design everything to invoke hate and fear. When you look, Fox News started out, there's a great documentary from the 90s called Outfoxed. And they type, and this is how bad things have gotten. Everything, the borders are red to invoke emotion and passion, and everything is just, the sky is falling. If you turn on and watch MSNBC now, MSNBC is following suit to keep us addicted and watching, get that dopamine hit because we're pissed. In reality, most of the stuff we're going to see in those headlines on cable news, talk radio, they're distractions from the stuff that we should really care about. Donald Trump is a whole circus to himself, which I believe and a fair amount of it is a distraction, so we're not paying attention to the real damage being done. He'll say something totally absurd and offensive that half of America is talking about, and then we're not watching, that he just dismantled the Department of Interior, or, as in case last week, handed over Department of Interior to a Doge bro.
Part of the way that the far right has been able to take over the Republican Party, and with them being such a small part of the population, they've gone into these central committees, they've gotten involved with the Republican Party, and been so unpleasant and so disruptive that the people who were more moderate just don't want to deal with it.
They shut down.
They shut down. And by being so incredibly difficult and unpleasant and talking about these crazy issues, the rational people in the room feel that it's easier to just disengage.
That's a great point, right? Is like when you're talking about movements, I think people too often think too big. I think they go too high in that, well, I can't run for Congress. I don't have that kind of money. I don't know anything about it. Or I can't run for president. Who am I? But you can go to your city council meeting each week. You can engage in your school board. You can become a member or start attending party meetings. You can engage, you can call your representatives. You can write letters and emails. There's all kinds of things that we can do. And I think oftentimes people don't realize how pivotal those things really are. They hold a lot of weight, but people don't see it. So they don't know it. And that's why one of the things that I always hit home is that not only does your voice matter more now than ever, but your voice is your freedom. It is why you have the freedom you have. And so you must use it, because if you do not, you will lose it.
So last week on April 19th was the 250th anniversary of the Battle of Lexington and Concord. And those people, inadvertently ended up in a battle that started the American Revolution. And it was all about, they were deprived of so many basic human rights. And when you look at what happened in the 10 years leading up to it, with the Boston Tea Party, the formation of the Sons of Liberty, our Bill of Rights in the Constitution, the first 10 amendments, almost all of those are an answer to the grievances that those people had on April 19th, 1775. And we have stopped using those rights. The right to petition our government, the right to peacefully assemble, free press, free speech. We're losing them. And I don't think we're noticing, because you look at the neighbor and say, well, that's somebody else losing their rights. It's not happened to me. And it manifests, like they go back to government. Local government in Butte has gone backwards to where Montana has one of the best constitutions in the country. The best. Public participation, public right to know, our right to a clean and healthy environment. We stopped asserting it because almost every decision that my local government in Butte makes is behind closed doors, or they suspend the rules on public participation to pass something, including our annual budget. I've been seeing on Facebook that there's some disputes in Missoula where Missoula's city government is refusing to do things in a public way.
It used to be the press that would be there to hold them accountable and say, you can't do this, but the press largely doesn't exist anymore.
I noticed that our news at a national and then local level, they all pull the same story. I mean, we've even seen clips online. I know tons of people have seen clips online where you can see different local news outlets literally verbatim running the same story. Their anchors are saying the exact same words, word for word. And so it's hard to feel like there can be trust in our local affiliates when they're just running something from somewhere else to begin with. And then secondly, there's nobody on the beat anymore. It used to be when I was a kid, you would see news reporters that were out at whatever event was happening. They had radio scanners, police scanners they would listen to, ambulance scanners, whatever, right? And they would be out in the community chasing the story, actively going out after it passionately. And we don't have journalism like that anymore. Not enough of it anyway.
What we could have, and if we used April 1975 as the model, the history books teach us about Paul Revere's Midnight Ride. We make one person the hero and it's always a man. That's just the way things go. But the reality is that was a network. That was Paul Revere and another guy who handed the message off that the Redcoats are coming to, a dozen people, and they handed it to a dozen men and women, and they spread the word. And the very next morning when they did that, that's the only reason that 400 people mustered together at Concord, Massachusetts to take on the British and defend, that is what started our entire country. And that's similar to what we might think is a phone tree today. People power, networking and organizing, just having conversations and exchanging factual information and challenge each other to make sure it's factual. That is where we take our country back. And it starts in every community. That's the only way we do it. And it's conversations like this that get that going. We do a social club where we do an educational luncheon once a month to bring people together, which I hope I'll see you there tomorrow, Jesse.
I'll be.
Yeah. So we, try to build fellowship, try to do, okay, well, let's do a social night and get together and have burgers and beers or whatever. And I think we take this back through people power and networking.
I mean, we really do have to get past that tribalism. I mean, earlier you spoke to what's going on with Bernie and AOC, and I went over to volunteer at that rally. It was great to see so many people get together, but you are right. You're not going to be able to herd cats for very long. You have to have a party that is willing to respect those differences and include that diversity. Understand that people will have differences of opinion and be accepting of that. We can still get the job done while not agreeing with each other on 100% of the issues.
And there's some things that, we're not going to change in control. And I'll use an example of where the movement went really bad and got out of control, his control. And it was, there was a bill, I don't remember the year, it was, some changes to banking regulation, the Dodd-Frank. John Tester was on the banking committee, and the reason he carried it and did it is the regulations they put in place to prevent financial disaster, having teams of auditors and lawyers, a whole floor of them in Wells Fargo, because those are multi-billion-dollar banks that can cause a lot of harm when things go wrong. The problem, though, is in places like Montana, where you still have community banks that don't have a whole floor of attorneys to do compliance, still had to do the same regulation. They were going to get priced out of business and ultimately gobbled up by Wells Fargo. So that was his intent. And Elizabeth Warren and then what did they call it? Our Revolution. They were unfamiliar. In the conversations afterwards, Boston doesn't have Massachusetts doesn't have community banks, so it was kind of foreign. They went after John Tester, and it was an election year. It was 2018. And I get it. Nobody wants to give bailouts to banks or breaks or trust them or those sorts of things. But we are talking about a different animal in rural America. So it's really hard to fit a one size fits all. And I had people, the Occupy Wall Street, when we had Occupy Butte, they would be in my office. Some of them pretty upset, pretty animated. Some of them with not a full set of facts. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, 90% when you explain that and the difference, like, oh yeah, you're right. And they were cool and all that. But the social media movement and the funders that started on the East Coast bashing on John Tester everywhere with commercials and things, they weren't interested in that. They were interested in letting the perfect become the enemy of the good. We're going to take this guy out and do all this. I remember the day we were driving down the road, I had to pull over and John asked us all to step out of the car. Because the last thing I heard was, John, I want to tell you, I had nothing to do with that. The next day, there's a bunch of swearing in the car. But, so that is one where we don't realize that our diversity is both our strength and our weakness if we act like that and we start compartmentalizing people. I mean, there's so many different things that came up over the years. I'll never support John Tester because he voted for the Keystone XL pipeline. Okay, well, organized labor thought it was really important, and pipelines are still way safer than their current method of transport, trains and trucks, which is already being done. We defeated the Keystone XL pipeline, but all of that tar sand oil is still being transported, and it's going to Asian markets, and the environmental risk and the environmental disasters from it, they are actually happening and they're real, and nobody talks about that. So we have to have reasonable expectations and rational conversations.
Thank you so much for listening. If you're enjoying the show so far and would like to be a part of the conversation, visit us at stppod.com. That's stppod.com. To hear more from our strangers, you can find them at their socials linked below in the description. Okay, enough of that. Back to the yapping you came for.
This is a TikTok. His name is @AaronParnas1. I will link him in the description so you can go watch his TikTok. There's words on the screen that says news RFK Jr. to create database of Americans with autism using medical records, including smartwatch data. So let me know if you can hear this.
We have some news right now. RFK Jr. is launching an effort to create a nationwide database to track individuals with autism and is using private medical records to get it done. According to latest reporting, the National Institutes of Health is helping to collect the private medical records of thousands of Americans across the country from both government and commercial databases to give to the Department of Health and Human Services so that RFK can create a registry of people with autism in the United States. The records include prescription records from pharmacies, lab testing, genome records from the Department of Veterans Affairs and Indian Health Services, private insurance claims, and data from your smartwatches and fitness trackers. It's also working on an agreement to secure Medicare and Medicaid data. Yes, this is real. The federal government is about to track you if you have autism and use your smartwatch to do it. I'll have a full breakdown on my Substack, link to my bio to subscribe for free.
Okay, and then he links his Substack. You can go listen to that if you would like that information. So a couple of comments I'm going to go into, and then we can have a discussion. So somebody said, people are going to stop seeking diagnoses for themselves or their children out of fear. Autism rates will suddenly, quote unquote, go down, and the Trump administration will then say they cured cancer. Someone else said, as an autism evaluator, that was my first thought. And then there's an entire discussion in the comments about a woman who has a scheduled evaluation for her son to be evaluated for autism and how she's afraid and she wants to cancel the appointment because what is that going to mean for her son if he gets an autism diagnosis now? And then, of course, there are the people who are in the comments who are questioning, how is this even legal? We have HIPAA laws. And someone also did bring in the Roe versus Wade of it all, that part of that was your right to privacy, especially for women, your right to medical privacy, and how they obviously have no issue getting rid of stuff like that. So is this just the next logical step?
Well, it's not even possible, and I'll tell you why. There is only one disease that has a national registry, and it's a failure, and it's cancer. There's a national cancer registry. There's voluntary reporting for a few other things, but I can tell you it's really important and key to Superfund, and it fails because, I'll tell you, anybody who grew up in Butte or Anaconda, we all know people who have weird cancers or, weird neurological disorders, MS, Lou Gehrig's disease, things like that, things tied to lead and arsenic. And these databases that are legally mandated. I grew up here, most of these disorders, they're not diagnosed in real time. They come on later. Things on the autism spectrum is the same, but you're reported. So say I moved to Seattle. Well, my cancer case is tied to Seattle, my address in Seattle, and where I get treatment. And it's not going to be able to be tracked or anything tying me back to the actual cause of the cancer, my growing up in Butte. So, we've seen the failure of that. It works for a lot of things. It doesn't work for, he's interested in improving, environmental exposures. But we already know, because of the cancer registry, that it doesn't work. And to create this and get the funding for it, and he can request all the data he wants, but to get it from all those different places, because your doctor cannot voluntarily provide that without a change in law. But even if they did all that, the funding for it, Congress would have to create that and authorize it in a new program. And the one good thing, there's 60 Democrats, or, you need 60 votes, and there's enough Democrats, you cannot get it done, administratively, couldn't do it. And honestly, it doesn't serve any useful purpose. Nobody in the right mind is going to fund this, because there are so many different disorders that really do affect people, that really do have causes that are suppressed by massive corporations. Even Republicans would want to tackle those first, but they're not going to, and the other fear is with this, if there truly is a tie, and there's a risk that there's a tie to some environmental cause, which would be an industrial polluter, to cases of autism or any disorder, they will kill it in a heartbeat. It's just like the spread of, McDonald's and, every few years, ketchup is a vegetable, or eggs are good for you, or eggs are bad for you, all that. There's too much fear and there's too much money on the line to actually identify it. And that's what drives politics.
It's also important to add in there that this is a great opportunity to really hit home the importance of the my body, my choice argument. We all too often put that onto these highly stigmatized issues like abortion or vaccines, but these are the kinds of issues that proliferate out of flippantly not recognizing the importance of the freedom to choose what you do with your body, right? I do not want to involuntarily be a test subject. I do not want people to have my medical records to do with as they will, and they should not have that. And so, much like the commenter who talked about how the Roe v. Wade decision was decided in large part on the privacy of our medical records, I think it's also to take it one step further and emphasize that this is why autonomy is so important, because if you don't have autonomy, it is only a matter of time before they can label label you and then subjugate you based on your label. This is blatantly eugenics. It's straight up eugenics, pure. And the problem with that is, well, yeah, he's not gonna be able to do shit. There are so many hurdles that he would have to go through to do that. The idea is that you're planting the idea of eugenics into the cultural discussion. You are planting a narrative that says it's actually helpful to, eradicate autism. It's a neurodivergence. We've already established that this is a neurodevelopmental issue. It's not a disease that you catch like a virus. It is not a fungus. It is not a parasite. It is a neurodevelopment. And when you get into neurodevelopment science, you have a really big question there that you really have to take seriously, which is this bad? Is this something that we should eradicate? I like to put it this way. If we didn't have ADHD, we wouldn't have had Robin Williams. If we didn't have autism, we wouldn't have Elon Musk. If we didn't have neurodevelopmental...
Well, wait, you don't give him a plus here.
No, but you know what I'm saying, right? Like, if you want to make it relatable, let's make it relatable, right? Neurodivergence, we probably wouldn't have had an Einstein and many of the huge developments that we've seen on all kinds of spectrums.
A wannabe social media influencer who's trying to catastrophize something to build up their following. Realistically, that's what that clip was.
And we have RFK, who is also trying to distract us from something. Because the thing is, think about everything that they would do politically they're trying to target some of your bit. People on the autism spectrum are not a political threat to the right wing. They're not a cost, they're not a liability. And then, consider the factions of the right. We can't even get universal, mental health registries or violent offender registries to make sure that people who may not be so safe with guns shouldn't have them. We can't get those right. But, so the NRA, somebody gets diagnosed with, depression, the NRA is going to freak out. You're stealing our guns. So their own base is going to rip that apart. So there is a reason, if we peel this apart further, why did RFK say that? Now, RFK's nuts, and maybe he's just trying to validate himself and talking, running at the mouth like he does so often. So if this ever did even start to become a real debate in Congress, what I would task citizens to do is say, let's peel apart the onion and see what the real basis is, or is this a real distraction? What are they trying to get? Because there's not a threat of autism. I mean, it's not a...
Well, I kind of challenge that a little bit, because there are a lot of people who are terrified of autism. They are terrified that they're going to catch it. They're terrified that their children are going to get it. I mean, just in Gallatin County, there are 3 cases of smallpox in the schools right now because people aren't vaccinating their children because they're afraid that they're going to give their child autism. And my concern, which I understand that this is probably not realistic, but there is a part of my brain that's like, well, we do have mandated reporting with, whether you want to or not, with like gonorrhea or HIV or AIDS. If you are diagnosed at a hospital with these things, you don't have a choice. It's immediately getting reported. And if people, yes, the NRA of it all, like that sort of thing, but people are so afraid that they're going to get something taken away from them. Whereas with autism, I think there would be a lot of people who would agree, because they're afraid of giving their child. It's the same thing when people were like, you can't watch SpongeBob because it's going to turn your kids gay. Like, people will do anything to get rid of something they're afraid of and they don't understand. And autism is one of those things.
Okay, and before you start to panic, it's measles, not smallpox. Smallpox,
I'm
we
so
could
sorry.
all be running like hell. Right. People have the right to be ignorant, and people have a right to believe the earth is flat and they're going to fall off the edge and they should never take a road trip, and they can do that. And in the case of vaccines, it's unfortunate. I lost my father and had to watch him die because ICUs were full. We were tracking who was vaccinated and who was not, and the neurosurgery centers that were within distance to save his life were full of unvaccinated COVID patients. And they were unvaccinated. And, I got a little bit of bitterness. Now I got a lot of bitterness, because those people, if they don't want to get a shot, don't get a shot. But do not clog up the medical system and kill other people. And, that's your freedom to do. And it's the same thing with, if you don't want to give your kid shot because you have an irrational phobia that has no scientific basis, I am going to make sure that I and my kids are vaccinated to protect myself from you. So I don't worry about protecting those people from themselves because I can't. I'm not going to spend any energy doing that. If they want to be morons, if they don't want to wear their seatbelts, cool, don't. When you're splattered on the side of the interstate, I'll wave. But
yeah, but those guys can't be legislating either. Like, we cannot have those people in any position of power because they're showing irreverence for how their actions affect other people.
We do. And I think these rational conversations where we boil it down, though, and say, okay, do we want to empower these nut jobs who think they're going to drive off the edge of the earth or, all these other things, we had like an hour and a half of chemtrail debates. Or if Jesse decides to start wearing a dress, he's not going to hurt me. He's not going to affect me at all. It might shock me. But, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't hurt me. Most of us see things that way, and we blow up those debates as if they matter. And it sucks up the oxygen because, Democrats, I want to rush in and defend Jesse's right to wear a dress. And I'm really, sensationalizing that. But most of us, leave me alone. I'm going to leave you alone. That's where most of us are if we don't take the bait and get into it.
Right. So let's talk about that registry. If you are somebody who genuinely cares about this conversation, that is a distraction. They're not going to be able to do it. But what they are trying to do that does affect these people who might have someone autistic in their family, they want to cut public health care. They want to cut and gut the facilities that take care of children who might have difficulty learning in a typical environment. These special plans, the 504 plans that some students have available to them. We have teachers that are earning some of the lowest starting wages in the country, and that makes it more difficult for you if you have a neuroatypical child. Those are things that they are actually trying to cut and attack. Those are things that we need people. If you care about autism care in this country, I would hope that you are focused on making sure that your school district is well funded, that you have access to reasonable health care in this country. They're not going to be able to create that list out of nowhere. But these other things are currently happening, and they are attacking those facilities as we speak.
Which would actually make the attacks on those, if RFK created his database and he showed that autism is a lot more common than we think, it'd be a lot harder to cut 504 programs because that would be evidence of the need. That's another reason why they're never going to do it, because it doesn't meet their agenda.
Fair. So for the people who are, because this is not the only one that I've seen of people talking about this, because obviously it's a very, gripping thing to say to somebody, and then, you run with it. You think, oh my God, is this something realistically with all the other headlines and everything that have been happening? It's like not really that far-fetched to think that they would, do something else that violates our rights. But so if we do have people who are concerned about this, and obviously, we've now explained why that is not a realistic thing to happen, what would you say is something that they could try to do to help the neurodivergent community? Like, should they continue to just get evaluated to show that the numbers are still there? Is there like a specific, I know you talked about a couple of things, like schooling and funding and stuff like that. Like, what would you suggest for somebody to, instead of focusing their time on this registry that realistically is probably never going to happen, what should they turn to focus all of their anger towards?
I would love to say run for your school board.
That's a great start. And if you're an individual and your family is affected, you continue getting the care and taking care of your people and your needs, however you need to, whether it's your kids or yourself, you continue on. The rest of us, now here's that. Keep this in mind. Every tyrant or dictator in history, right-wing movements, they always demonize, and there's great examples in recent years. They will demonize some population that is different, whether it's skin color. It's been Hitler did it with the Jews. And I know people dismiss because that was genocide and all this, but every dictator and far right movement does that. Whether it was immigrants, people of color, transgender people, in the 2000s, it was gay people. It was, actually in the 80s, it was really, the AIDS, you got to stay away from them. So it is easy to demonize people. And one thing that Republicans know, they're the far right, know from cognitive research is because of our nurturing morality, Democrats will get sucked in to defend and engage. And sometimes we need to not engage and just say, flip them on and say, no, you're not going to. And, we're going to get back to talking about healthcare and housing and good paying jobs, because transgender, people of color, gay people, straight people, we all need the same thing. So we're going to put you right back on track and not get sucked into your diversion and demand that. And that's where we really need to stand up. I mean, I think if we allow ourselves to be peeled off and sectioned off, that buys into the narrative, because they tried, and they were really good at it, to put transgender people, a really, really small minority, as a separate entity from the rest of the population. And the best we could do is stand together and say, no, they're us, and they need the same things that we need, and that's where we're going to steer the conversation and demand fairness. So I do think when that changes, if we do, and if we continue to approach these issues where they try to divide us with that same mentality, if the threat does become real and attacks become real, then we're more organized to react and stand up for those people that they're trying to pigeonhole. Because that's what, you think back to the last 30 years, the far right always has somebody different to single out. This is just the next chapter.
No, I have noticed that, even as somebody who is self-proclaimed politically illiterate, even I have noticed that. So yeah, I mean, I definitely would then have to agree with you that the best course of action is to just ignore the distraction and focus on the things that are actually happening, and don't get caught up in the scare tactics. And I think we even talked about, Jesse, I think you made this point on either the last episode or episode 4 of when the leaks happened with the group chat of this is something that could possibly be a distraction, because there's things that they're trying to get past. There's things that they don't want people to focus on. There's things that they don't, there's always this political theater that, I've heard you guys say a bunch. And I would, as somebody who is neurodivergent, I would agree with does seem like a scare tactic. And not every neurodivergent, I don't speak for the entire community, but I know myself, I can get locked in to a topic like this, and my brain just goes to every single scenario that could possibly happen. And we got to try to, if you can, you got to try to kind of get yourself out of that loop and focus on the things that are actually going on.
I think that's an important point too, right? Is that, yes, we have to be careful where we put our attention, right? Because this is an attention economy that we live in, and, they're driving the attention where they want it to be. Everybody is kind of competing for the headline and competing for the spotlight at the moment. So they're going to say whatever they have to say. Nancy Mace is a great example of that, right? She is completely insignificant. She's just, a parrot, Polly Cracker, parroting all the same Republican talking points. And she can't get attention unless she uses slurs against trans people. And so that's a great example of how that works. But I think what's important also to remember is, yes, you can keep an eye on this. But also, I think I do want to mention that I don't think that it's necessarily a completely invalid fear. And this is why. As someone who my medical history, my medical status is my employment is reliant on it. If any doctor at any point can just come along and say, well, you know what, because of this or because of that, I am going to disqualify you until you do X, Y, and Z from your career, and I won't be able to make a living in my job anymore. And so when we hear these things and when we see these registries and how they're going to collect all this information, we are very credibly wondering, what are they going to do with this? And I think that most Americans don't know that they can't do it. They don't know that the hurdles, they don't know that there are a bunch of hurdles in front of this, because what we're seeing every day is broken law after broken law after broken law. And some of them are so blatantly obvious, and they're going through with it anyway, that we don't know how far they're going to push it or how far they're not. I think it's fair to say keep an eye on it, but also I think it's really important that we take care of our emotional state, right? We cannot buy in 100% that easily. We have to slow down. We have to research. We have to figure out what's in place to stop it. We have to really be cognizantly aware of where we're going to put our attention and where we're going to give our outrage. And that's a key way just to stop them in general, but that will preserve ourselves as well.
You're spot on. You said one of the most important things. That's what I worry about, and I catch it with myself when I get into the loop of worrying about everything. I mean, I'm paralyzed, I'm depressed, and at home, what am I going to do? You feel hopeless, and then it ends up because I'm a brute, and the caveman comes out, and it's like, Jesus, that guy flying the Trump flag, am I going to just snap and go punch him one day? It's like, no, that's not going to work. So we gotta make sure to take a step back individually, all these issues, probably triage and prioritize, because we will exhaust ourselves and drive ourselves crazy. And then we're going to be ineffective. And hence we end up with Donald Trump because we're just angry. I mean, I've been saying this for a long time, and I didn't really understand where it was going. Work for Tester and the calls. It's like people are just pissed, and they don't even seem to know what they're pissed at, because every day they're pissed at something else, and they're just pissed. We are pissed by design, because when we're angry, we're easily controlled. We're angry or scared, and that's a powerful motivator. So, I mean, keeping our wits about us. I mean, I think we have to prepare for the worst and keep moving on with life, but be there for each other and say, yeah, to the neurodivergent people of the world, if these things, if they ever manifest and start coming, we're with you. We'll be there right with you. This ain't happening again, and know that. And I think that's one of those things. Reassure our people that we know that are victimized. If you have transgender friends, let them know it's I'm with you, and I'm not going to have a big rally and ask you to speak and make you put a bigger target on yourself. I just want you to know that I'm with you, and I know 50 other people that'll be with you. So we're here for you.
I think that's a good point that you said, like, you and 50 other people that are like behind them. I think that's a really good point to kind of, remind people every once in a while that yes, these news lines are loud, and yes, the MAGAs of the world are very loud, but they also in reality are very few. I mean, there are a lot of people who, you saw Pedro Pascal wearing the Protect the Dolls shirt at the thing that he just went to. Like, there are a lot of people who stand behind trans people, and there are a lot of people who stand behind the neurodivergent community, and there are a lot of people who stand with queer people and people of color and Black people and all of these things. And I know that like the world can get scary and crazy, but really there it may be quieter, but there are a lot of people who are willing to put their money where their mouth is, so to speak, and put their life on the line for other people in other communities. And I really hope that, not to get preachy, but if there is anyone ever who listens to this now or in the future that is in a space where they think that they're alone or nobody cares about them, that like, it's just not true. I know I know it's to your core, you believe it, but there are so many people who do not want this, just like you.
You got 4 of us right here.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, even people who are doing the wrong thing have networks of people that care about them. Ted Kaczynski had a community, go to the library, grocery store, all that stuff. He had a lot of people who cared about him and things like that. I mean, so we all have networks of people, no matter who we are. We are pack animals. That's biologically wired into all of us. I mean, toxic individualism creeps in where some of us think that we're special and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, we're just not. We're all important to each other in different ways, and we're not better than each other. And it's just something to remember.
I think too that with social media the way it is, and how kind of secluded we can all get and have become as a society, I think having these conversations like we have has been really good. And I also think that it is good to, there are, if you are afraid to like just go out and talk to people. I have social anxiety. That is terrifying to me. This is me pushing myself every week or every other week to talk to strangers. But there are communities online. You like you said, we are pack animals. Humans are pack animals. We are meant to have a village behind us. And there are so many different ways that you can find those things. And the internet is such a scary place, especially right now with everything going on in the world, that like really, really, please just find a community that is not crazy, toxic, and like get off Reddit. I love Reddit, but get off Reddit. It sucks. Get off Twitter. It sucks.
Social media breaks because we all get addicted to it, and the dopamine hit and all that sort of stuff. Those algorithms, they're all free in a sense, but we're selling ourselves and our emotions to those algorithms to keep us watching, keep us angry, sometimes keep us happy, all that stuff. It's a good thing to remember to take a break and chill out. But while we're talking about all these other issues that are far off and unlikely, we could all take tonight and call our legislators and say, do not screw me and screw all Montanans on our property taxes. That's something we could actually do that is real and right in front of us.
Absolutely. And I will put a link in our description. It is a website that you can go to and just put your state, and it will tell you who your local senators are, and it'll break it all down for you and it'll give you their contact information so you can reach out. And it's not a bunch of stuff that you have to search for and do a lot of things, because I know, myself included, I don't like to have to look for things. I like people to just tell me where to go. So I will tell you where to go in the description.
Well, the easy thing you can do is still do it. Like people like my mom, I tell her that, and she said, well, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do this. And Mom, pick up the phone, 406-444-4800. Tell them where you live. Tell them who your senator and your representative is, and you want to leave them a note. They still do that, and they bring it. It's probably more effective than emailing. So if you go actually call that switchboard and tell the nice young people there that you don't want to leave them a note. Don't screw my property taxes. Don't screw me over. No slush funds. Any message like that, that's effective, and it's easy.
Awesome. Well, Erik, it was really nice to meet you. Thanks so much for joining us today. We hope to have you back soon, and we've had a great conversation. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, it was so fun.
Guys. Yeah, it was good talking to you guys, and just everybody remember, we can come through this and we can change things if we keep a level head and start at the grassroots. I mean, and be there for each other.
Is there anything specific you'd like to plug?
Well, we're still working. We're amateurs. We're not as slick as you guys are, and we kind of just started this off on a whim, but we started a website finally, madaboutmontana.com, the Mad About Montana podcast. That and just keep fighting, get engaged, get involved with your central committee, whether it's Republican or Democrat. So you don't have a ton of Republican listeners, but they should get involved too and start having reasonable conversations.
Listeners in Silver Bow County, when does that central committee meet?
See, it's the first Monday of every month at 6 o'clock at the Carpenters Union Hall. And then there's the Burroughs Committee, or Burroughs Club, which is educational, open to everybody. That is the fourth Thursday at noon at the East Side Athletic Club. And you can have lunch or not. Lunch at $15, usually pretty good. Lady who does it's from Whitehall. So, start getting involved and, check out social media for some updates on, different groups. And I think all the central committees have that.
Thank you guys so much for listening. We will see you in a week, 2 weeks. Who knows? We've been going off script, but thank you so much for joining us. Bye.
Bye.